I stood at that bus stop in my graduation gown, $60 in crumpled bills in my hand. My mother, Carol, pressed them into my palm and said, "Good luck out there. No hug, no tears." Just those 4 words. My father, Frank, sat in the driver's seat, engine running, eyes straight ahead. My brother, Tyler, smirked from the back window. Then they drove away. The taillights disappeared around the corner, and I realized they actually meant it. I was 18, alone, and the sun was setting behind me. I watched until I couldn't see the car anymore. My legs felt like they might give out, but I made myself look down at what I had. The backpack on my shoulder held 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my phone that would probably stop working tomorrow when they canceled the plan, and nothing else. The $60 felt heavy in my hand, like it was mocking me. $60 to start a life. The bench at the bus stop became my bed that first night. I couldn't think of anywhere else to go. I'd been homeschooled my entire life, so I had no friends from school to call. My parents had cut ties with extended family years ago, and I was only now understanding why. They'd been planning this. They'd isolated me completely, so that when they threw me away, there'd be no one to catch me. I kept replaying the morning in my head. They'd told me at breakfast, matter of fact, like they were discussing the weather. "You're 18 now. You're on your own." I'd laughed. I thought it was a joke, maybe some weird lesson about responsibility. But then my mother packed my backpack while I was getting ready for graduation. My father loaded it in the car. Tyler had known. He'd actually known and said nothing. The ceremony had been small, just for homeschool families at the community center. I'd walked across that stage thinking my life was about to begin, that maybe things would finally get better. Instead, they drove me to the edge of town and left me there. I tried to sleep on that bench, but every car that passed made me jump. The night got cold. June in Oregon means the days are warm, but the nights still bite. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to make a plan. I had no bank account because they'd never let me open one. No job because they'd never let me work. No driver's license because they'd never taught me to drive. I had nothing except what I was wearing and what was in that backpack. When morning finally came, I was stiff and exhausted. A woman waiting for the early bus looked at me with suspicion, then moved to the other end of the bench. I probably looked terrible. My graduation gown was wrinkled and dirty from sleeping in it, my hair was a mess, and I'm sure my eyes were red from crying. I walked to the public library when it opened. The librarian watched me carefully as I logged on to one of the computers. I searched for homeless shelters, resources for young adults, anything. There was one shelter in town, about 3 miles away. I could walk that. The walk took me almost an hour because I had to stop several times to rest. I wasn't used to walking long distances, and the backpack was heavier than I expected. When I finally reached the shelter, I felt a surge of hope. This was it. They'd help me. They'd understand. The woman at the front desk had kind eyes at first. Her name tag said Linda. I explained my situation, trying not to cry, trying to sound calm and reasonable. She nodded along, made sympathetic noises, and then asked to see my identification. "I don't have any," I said. "My parents took my documents." Her expression changed slightly. "I need at least one form of ID to process your intake. Birth certificate, social security card, something. My parents have those. They won't give them to me." Linda frowned. "Can you call them and ask? They're the ones who left me with nothing. They won't help." She leaned back in her chair, her sympathy cooling into skepticism. "What's your parents' names?" I told her. I watched her face change completely. "Carol and Frank? From Riverside Church?" My stomach dropped. "Yes. I know your mother. She's on the donations committee." Linda's voice had gone flat. "I'm sure if you call her and apologize for whatever happened, she'll help you get your documents. We have a wait list anyway, 2 weeks at least. Come back when you have ID." I tried to explain, but she'd already decided. In her mind, I was a troublemaker, probably a runaway, definitely the problem. My mother was a respectable church lady. I was just a difficult teenager making up stories. I left the shelter and walked back toward town, my hope crumbling with every step. It was worse than I'd thought. This wasn't just about surviving without help. This was about surviving in a town where everyone knew my parents and no one would believe me. That night, I slept behind a grocery store, hidden between dumpsters. It rained. Everything in my backpack got soaked. I huddled under a piece of cardboard and watched my phone die, the screen going black at 3 in the morning. Now I didn't even have that. By the third morning, I'd spent 15 of my $60 on food. I was hungry, cold, wet, and terrified. But more than that, I was starting to understand the real scope of my problem. My parents weren't just neglectful. They'd set me up to fail. They'd made sure I had nothing, no one, and no credibility. In this town, I was already branded as the troubled daughter. No amount of truth would change that. I had to leave. Staying here meant slow destruction. I needed to go somewhere no one knew my family, where I could start over completely. I counted my remaining money. $45 left. A bus ticket to Portland cost $38. That would leave me with $7 in a city where I knew no one, but at least it was a city. Big cities had more resources, more shelters, more opportunities, and no one would know Carol and Frank. The bus ride took 4 hours. I watched Oregon roll past the window, trees and hills giving way to suburbs and then city. Every mile felt like distance from the trap my parents had set. By the time we pulled into the Portland station, I felt something close to hope again. This could work. This had to work. I found a youth services center in the phone book at the station. It was getting easier to lie now. When I walked in and they asked my age, I said 17 without hesitation. 18 meant adult services, which meant more barriers. 17 meant youth programs, which meant more help. The woman who greeted me was named Patricia. She had short gray hair and wore colorful scarves, and when I told her I needed help, she didn't hesitate. We can give you a bed, a hot meal, and start working on getting you stable. How does that sound? I almost cried with relief. Within 2 hours, I had a bed in their transitional housing unit, a shower with actual hot water, and clean clothes from their donation closet. The meal they served that night was simple, just spaghetti and bread, but it was the first real food I'd eaten in days. Patricia sat with me after dinner and explained the program. I could stay up to 90 days while they helped me find work and permanent housing. They'd help me get my documents, apply for benefits, connect with job training programs. For the first time since graduation, I felt like maybe I'd survive this. The other young people in the program were kind. There was a girl named Emma who showed me how to navigate the city bus system. A guy named Marcus told me about under the table, work if I needed money fast. Everyone had a story of survival, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in mine. On my 4th day there, Patricia called me into her office. I walked in feeling good, thinking maybe she had news about a job lead. Instead, her face was serious, almost sad. "Augusta, I need to talk to you about something." I sat down, my stomach tightening. "Your parents filed a missing persons report. The police contacted us this morning. They tracked your bus ticket purchase." The room seemed to tilt. "What?" "Your parents reported you as a runaway. They told the police you're mentally unstable and you need help. They also claim you stole money from them, the $60. "That's not true. That's not any of it true." Patricia's expression was pained. "I believe you, Augusta, but legally I have to cooperate with the police. They're coming this afternoon to take you back home." The panic hit me like ice water. Going back meant worse than abandonment. It meant punishment for daring to survive. It meant being trapped with people who'd already shown they wanted me gone. "I can't go back there," I said. "Please." "I don't have a choice. I'm sorry." I sat there trying to think, trying to find a solution, but my mind was racing too fast. My parents were smarter than I'd given them credit for. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd created a legal framework to force me back if I tried to get help. The missing persons report meant any official service would have to return me. The theft accusation gave them a weapon to use against me. The mental instability claim meant anything I said would be dismissed. Patricia left me alone in the office while she went to make some calls. I looked at the door. It was open. The hallway was empty. I had maybe 10 minutes before she came back. I grabbed my backpack and ran. I didn't think about where I was going. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I ended up in a park somewhere in southeast Portland, collapsed on the grass, trying to catch my breath and figure out what I'd just done. I'd run from the one place that could help me. Now I had no resources, no shelter, and I was wanted. The police were looking for me. My parents had made me a fugitive. The reality settled over me like a weight. I was homeless in a city I didn't know, with no money, no phone, and no legal way to access help. Every official channel was compromised. My parents had thought of everything. That night, I slept in the park, hidden in some bushes near the playground. It was July now, so at least it was warmer. But the fear kept me awake most of the night. Every sound was the police coming to take me back. Every person walking past was a potential threat. For the next 6 weeks, I learned what it really meant to be on the streets. I met other homeless young people who taught me how to survive. A girl named Jade, about 22, with purple streaks in her hair, took me under her wing. She showed me where to find free food, which dumpsters behind which restaurants had the best leftovers, where to sleep safely, and how to avoid the police. Jade introduced me to a squat, an abandoned warehouse where about 15 people lived. It wasn't safe exactly, but it was better than sleeping in parks. We had mattresses salvaged from the dump, a system for keeping watch, and a sense of community. These people understood survival in a way my parents never had. Through Jade's connections, I found work. Under-the-table jobs that paid cash. I cleaned houses for people who didn't ask questions. I did day labor, hauling junk and moving furniture. I walked dogs for busy professionals who paid cash and didn't care about my lack of ID. The work was hard and irregular, but I made about $40 a week. I started saving, hiding the cash in my backpack, planning for the day I could afford a room somewhere. 2 months passed. I developed routines. I knew which coffee shops let you use the bathroom without buying anything. I knew which libraries were safe to spend the day in. I knew how to look invisible, how to avoid attention, how to survive. I thought I was making it work. I thought I'd found a way to survive until I turned 19 and the missing persons case would automatically close. Then I could resurface, get my documents, build a real life. I had a plan. Then the raid happened. It was 2 in the morning when the police burst into the warehouse. Lights, shouting, chaos. I woke up confused, still half, asleep, and then hands were pulling me up, putting me in handcuffs. Someone had been selling drugs out of the squat. I hadn't known. I'd been so focused on my own survival that I hadn't seen what was happening around me. They arrested everyone. Lined us up outside while they searched the building. I stood there in handcuffs, terrified, watching my life collapse again. When they asked for my ID, I had nothing to show them. They ran my name and found the missing persons report. "We've been looking for you," one officer said, not unkindly. "Your parents have been worried sick." I wanted to scream that they weren't worried, that they'd orchestrated all of this, but what was the point? I'd been found in a drug den with no ID and a missing persons flag on my name. Nothing I said would matter. They took me to juvenile detention because of my status. The facility was clean and institutional, all white walls and fluorescent lights. I sat in a small room and waited. I knew what was coming. My parents arrived the next morning. I heard my mother before I saw her, her voice carrying down the hallway. "Oh, thank God you found her." The performance was flawless. They came into the room where I sat, and I watched them transform. My father's face crumpled into what looked like relief. My mother rushed to me, tried to hug me while I sat rigid and unmoving. The social worker and police officer in the room watched this reunion, and I could see them believing it. "We've been so worried," my mother said, pulling back to look at me. "Baby, why did you run away?" "You left me at a bus stop," I said flatly. My father shook his head sadly. "Augusta, sweetheart, you know that's not what happened. You got upset when we talked about expectations for adulthood, and you ran off. We've been searching for you for months." "That's a lie." My mother turned to the social worker. She's been having episodes like this since she was young. Paranoid thoughts, making up elaborate stories. "We've had her in therapy, but she stopped taking her medication last year." The social worker made notes. "Do you have medical records?" My father nodded. "Everything's documented. Her psychiatrist, Dr. Winters, has been treating her for years." It was so smooth, so practiced. They had an answer for everything. And when they produced documents, records from a doctor, Winters I'd never met, describing treatment I'd never received, I realized how deep their deception went. "We want to get her help," my mother said. "Real help this time. We think she needs inpatient treatment." "No," I said. understanding what was happening. No, this is all fake. I've never seen a psychiatrist. I've never had medication. They're lying. My outburst only proved their point. The more I protested, the more I looked exactly like what they were describing, a troubled young woman with paranoid delusions. The social worker recommended a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. My parents agreed immediately, signing the paperwork with expressions of pained concern. They were having me committed. I was sedated when I fought back. When I tried to tell them the truth, to make someone listen, they stuck a needle in my arm, and the world went fuzzy. I woke up in a behavioral health facility, in a room with bars on the windows and a lock on the door. My father visited me once during those first few days. My mother didn't come. Tyler didn't come. Just Frank, standing in the doorway of my room looking at me with something like disgust. "You're an embarrassment," he said quietly. "You always have been. You ask too many questions. You make us look bad. We gave you 18 years. That's more than enough." "Why?" I asked. It was the only word I could get out. "Because you're not ours. You never really were. Now stay away from us. Accept the help they're offering here, and then disappear. If you ever try to contact us again, we'll make sure you stay somewhere like this permanently." He left. I sat on the bed in that locked room and finally understood. I wasn't their daughter in any way that mattered. I was an obligation they'd tolerated for 18 years, and now they were making sure I'd never bother them again. The system they'd weaponized against me was perfect. If I stayed calm, I proved I didn't need to be here, but they'd just extend my hold. If I got upset, I proved I was unstable. There was no winning. The 72-hour hold became a week. My parents pushed for an extended evaluation, and without anyone advocating for me, the facility agreed. I was careful, so careful. I participated in every therapy session. I stayed calm. I followed every rule. But it didn't matter. My parents had money, a lawyer, and a narrative that everyone believed. Dr. Helen Brennan was assigned as my psychiatrist. She was probably in her mid-50s, with sharp brown eyes and a direct way of speaking that was different from the other staff. In our first session, she asked me to tell her why I thought I was there. I'd learned by then. My parents say I have mental health issues, paranoia, delusions. And what do you say? I looked at her carefully. Does it matter what I say? It matters to me. Something in her tone made me take a risk. Over the next few sessions, I told her everything. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just the facts, the abandonment, the missing documents, the false police report, the fraudulent medical records. I kept my voice steady, my recounting clinical. I showed her I could be rational, clear, thinking, and honest. Dr. Brennan listened. She asked questions, probing questions that went deeper than surface answers. She requested the original medical records from Dr. Winters. She contacted my parents' lawyer with follow-up questions, and slowly I saw her expression change. "Augusta," she said in our 5th session, "I've reviewed everything carefully. The medical records your parents provided were signed by someone who lost his license 3 years ago. They're fabricated." I felt something crack open in my chest. Someone believed me. "I'm going to advocate for your release. More than that, I'm going to help you get legal emancipation paperwork. You're 18. You have rights. What they've done is abuse of the system, and I'm going to make sure you get free." For the first time in months, I had hope, real hope. Dr. Brennan filed paperwork. She contacted legal aid services. She had connections to job training programs that could help me once I was released. My release was scheduled for 3 days away. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. The night before my scheduled release, my parents showed up without warning. They had their lawyer with them, a man in an expensive suit named Richard something. I was called into a conference room where they sat with the facility director, Dr. Brennan, and 2 other administrators I'd never met. "We're here to contest the release," the lawyer said. "Our daughter is not ready to be unsupervised, doctor. Brennan has been manipulated by a very convincing young woman, but the pattern of behavior speaks for itself." They'd brought Tyler, my 17-year-old brother, who sat there in a button-down shirt looking like a choir boy, and proceeded to lie. He talked about how I'd always been violent at home, how he'd been scared of me, how I'd destroyed property and threatened the family. Every word was fiction, delivered with tears in his eyes. Then they brought in people from their church, people I'd never met, who testified to my parents' character, who talked about what devoted parents Carol and Frank were, how heartbroken they'd been when I ran away, how much they'd sacrificed trying to help me. The lawyer presented it all beautifully. A troubled girl with documented mental health issues, found living in a drug den, now manipulating a well-meaning psychiatrist. He had character witnesses, fabricated evidence, and a compelling narrative. Dr. Brennan fought back. She presented her findings about the fraudulent records. She testified that I showed no signs of the diagnoses my parents claimed, but she was one voice against a coordinated assault. The emergency hearing ended with the judge ordering 30 more days of evaluation. Dr. Brennan looked stricken. My parents looked satisfied. Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes. After they left, Dr. Brennan came to my room. "This is wrong," she said. "This is abuse of the system. But they have resources and you don't. They have lawyers and you have me. What do I do?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time. "Officially, I can't tell you to do anything except cooperate with the process. Unofficially, I think you need to understand that legal channels might not work here. Your parents are manipulating the system, and they're good at it." That night, I learned they'd petitioned for guardianship. If it was granted, they'd have control over me even though I was 18. They could keep me institutionalized indefinitely. It was the perfect trap. I'd be erased, locked away, and no one would question the caring parents protecting their mentally ill daughter. I lay in that bed with bars on the windows and understood that waiting for the system to save me was going to get me destroyed. My parents had proven they could manipulate lawyers, judges, and institutions. They had money and status. I had nothing but the truth, and the truth wasn't enough. The next evening during shift change, I noticed something. Dr. Brennan was leaving for the day. She passed by my room, and for just a second, the door didn't quite latch. She walked away without looking back. On my pillow, hidden under my blanket, was a note written on a prescription pad, an address in Northeast Portland. A name: Sarah Morrison runs a network helping abused youth disappear. This never came from me. I understood. Dr. Brennan couldn't help me through official channels, so she was giving me an unofficial one. She was risking her license, her career, to give me a way out. I waited 2 hours until the evening medication rounds started. The facility was always most chaotic then, with staff moving between rooms, multiple things happening at once. I slipped out of my room, took a jacket and shoes from the donation closet near the common area, and walked out the door Dr. Brennan had left unlocked. No alarms, no shouts. I just walked out into the Portland evening and kept walking. I found Sarah's address before midnight. It was a small office in a church basement, and Sarah herself was a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a matter-of-fact manner. She listened to my story without interrupting, then nodded. "You're not the first kid whose parents weaponize the system against them. We help young people disappear when that's the only option left." She opened a file cabinet and pulled out forms. "I can get you temporary documents under a different name. Bus ticket to Seattle. Connections there who can help you get on your feet. But you understand what this means, right? You'll be off the grid. No official existence. No access to most systems. It's survival, not living. It's better than being locked up." Sarah created a new identity for me, Emma Wright. She gave me a bus ticket, $200 cash, and a phone number for someone in Seattle. His name is David. He runs a shelter specifically for youth who can't use their real names. He'll help you. I became Emma Wright at 18 years old. I took a bus to Seattle and didn't look back. The years that followed were hard in ways I'm still processing. I worked 3 jobs: night janitor at an office building, morning shift at a fast food place, and afternoons walking dogs for people who posted on community boards. I lived in a room in a house with 5 other people, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, sharing one bathroom between all of us. I saved every penny I could. I couldn't pursue education because I didn't have real identity documents. I couldn't build credit or access most opportunities. I existed in the shadows, working cash jobs and living month to month. But I was free. No one was trying to lock me up. No one was telling lies about me. I was surviving on my own terms. When I turned 21, Sarah connected me with a lawyer who specialized in cases like mine. It took 6 months and every dollar I'd saved, but she helped me navigate getting my real identity back. We discovered my parents never actually filed for guardianship. It had been a threat, a way to scare me, but they hadn't followed through. Too expensive, too much effort. They just wanted me gone. The missing persons case had closed when I turned 19. I was legally just an adult who'd left home. Nothing more. Getting my real documents back felt like reclaiming myself. I was Augusta again, legally, officially, but I had 3 years of gaps in my history. No credit, no references, no educational records beyond high school. I enrolled in community college using financial aid. I was 22, taking classes with teenagers, working full-time and going to school full-time. I barely slept. My studio apartment was the size of a closet, but it was mine. I got my GED first, then started accumulating college credits. Every achievement felt like defiance. Every grade, every class, every semester completed was proof that my parents were wrong about me. I transferred to a state university when I was 24. I studied business and finance because I understood better than most people what it meant to have nothing. I wanted to understand money, how to build security, how to never be that girl at the bus stop again. I discovered I had an aptitude for investment analysis. Numbers made sense to me. Market patterns, risk assessment, portfolio management, it all clicked in a way nothing else had. I got an internship at a small investment firm during my senior year. They liked my work ethic, my hunger, my ability to see patterns others missed. I graduated with honors when I was 27. The firm hired me full-time. I started as a junior analyst making $43,000 a year, which felt like a fortune after years of surviving on almost nothing. Then Tyler called. I was 27 years old, 3 years into my career, finally feeling stable for the first time in my life. I had my own apartment, not sharing with roommates. I had savings. I had a job with benefits and a path forward. I'd been in therapy for 2 years, working through everything that had happened. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Augusta? The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. It's Tyler, your brother. My hand tightened around the phone. How did you get this number? I found you on social media. LinkedIn, actually. I saw you're working at Harrison Investments in Seattle. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. The warmth in his voice felt wrong. What do you want? I know you have every reason to hate me, hate all of us. But I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few years, and I realize what Mom and Dad did to you was wrong. Really wrong. I said nothing, waiting. They're sick, Tyler continued. Both of them. Dad had a stroke last year. Mom has heart problems. They're not doing well, and I think they're finally understanding what they did. There's a family reunion planned for Dad's 70th birthday in 6 months. They want you to come. They want to make things right. Make things right, I repeated flatly. I know it sounds impossible, but I think they're genuine. They're getting older, facing mortality, and they're full of regret. Please, Augusta, it would mean everything if you came. To all of us. Something in his voice sounded sincere. Or maybe I just wanted it to be sincere. Some small, hurt part of me that was still 18 and abandoned wanted to believe my family could love me. I'll think about it, I said. Over the next few weeks, Tyler texted me regularly. Photos of Mom and Dad looking older, frailer, updates about the reunion planning, stories about his wife and baby daughter. He seemed genuinely invested in reconnecting, in building something real. I talked about it endlessly in therapy. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Susan Park, listened and asked careful questions. What do you want from this reunion? She asked. I don't know, maybe closure? Maybe to see them and realize they don't have power over me anymore? And if it's a trap? I'd thought about that. Then I'll leave. But I'll leave on my terms this time. I decided to go. But if I was going back, I was going back as someone they couldn't dismiss. Someone who'd succeeded despite everything they'd done. I wanted them to see exactly what they'd thrown away. I'd been promoted twice since starting at the firm. I was now a senior analyst making $87,000 a year, with a solid investment portfolio of my own that I'd been building aggressively. I had over $50,000 saved. For someone who'd started with $60, it felt like wealth. But for one day, I decided to look like more. I wanted the visual impact. I wanted them to see success personified. I rented a limousine for the day. I bought a designer dress, deep blue with elegant lines that cost more than I'd ever spent on clothing. I got my hair done at an upscale salon, professional makeup, everything. I bought a luxury handbag, good jewelry. I went all out. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about the symbol. I wanted to roll up to that reunion and make them see that I'd not only survived, I'd thrived. The reunion was scheduled for a Saturday in June, 13 years to the day after they left me at that bus stop. I don't know if they chose that date deliberately, but the symbolism wasn't lost on me. I woke up that morning with my stomach in knots. I put on that dress, those heels, that jewelry. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked successful, put together. Nothing like the scared 18-year-old they'd abandoned. The limousine picked me up at 2 in the afternoon. The driver was professional, calling me ma'am, holding doors. I settled into the leather seats and tried to breathe. The drive from Seattle to my hometown took 3 hours. I watched the landscape change from city to suburbs to the rural Oregon town where I'd grown up. Every mile made my heart beat faster. We pulled up to my parents' house at 5 in the evening. They still lived in the same place, the house I'd grown up in. The driveway was full of cars. People were scattered around the lawn, the backyard. I could see them from the tinted windows of the limo. My mother looked older but healthy. My father was leaning on a cane but hardly frail. Tyler was there with a pretty blonde woman holding a baby. Extended family I barely remembered. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone dressed nicely, laughing, eating from tables loaded with food. They'd built a whole life, a whole perfect family narrative, and I hadn't been part of it. "Ready, ma'am?" the driver asked. I took a breath. Yes. He got out, walked around, opened my door. The conversation around the lawn stopped. Everyone turned to look. I stepped out of that limousine in my designer dress and expensive heels. My hair perfect, my makeup flawless. I looked like money. I looked like success. I walked toward the gathering, head high, heart pounding. My mother stared at me, confused. "Can I help you? Are you lost?" It took her a second to recognize her own daughter. When she did, her face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, something that might have been fear, and then hardness. "Mom," I said clearly, "it's me, Augusta." The silence was deafening. My father stepped forward, his face darkening. "What are you doing here?" "Tyler invited me." Tyler appeared at my elbow. I expected warmth, support. Instead, his face held something like amusement. "I told you to come," he said, his voice carrying across the lawn. "But I didn't think you'd show up like this." His tone was mocking, not welcoming, mocking. The truth hit me like ice water. This was a setup. My mother recovered quickly, her voice rising so everyone could hear. "We asked our troubled daughter to come so we could help her, and she shows up in a rented limo pretending to be someone she's not." My father added, "Still living in fantasy, I see. Still lying." The gathered family members started murmuring. I could see them believing it. Poor Carol and Frank, with their troubled daughter putting on airs. Tyler pulled out his phone, grinning. "Already recording, sis. This is going to be a great story." They'd spent 13 years crafting a narrative. The troubled daughter who ran away. The heartbroken parents. They'd told everyone their version, and no one had questioned it. Now I'd shown up looking successful, and they were reframing it as delusion, as pretense. Relatives started asking questions. "Is that limo really rented? Where have you been? Why did you abandon your family?" The narrative was flipped. In their story, I'd abandoned them. My mother started crying, the performance perfect. We gave her everything, and she just left us, disappeared for years. Now she shows up like this, trying to hurt us. The family rallied around her. My father put his arm around her shoulders. Tyler kept his phone up, recording my humiliation. Cousins and aunts I barely remembered looked at me with distrust and disappointment. I stood there alone in my expensive dress, surrounded by people who believed I was the villain. "You're sick," someone said. "An uncle, maybe. You need help." "This is so sad," an aunt murmured. "Carol, I'm so sorry." I'd planned this moment for months. I'd imagined their shock, their realization that they'd thrown away a daughter who became successful despite them. Instead, they'd turned it into another humiliation, another way to paint me as unstable, dishonest, wrong. Tyler stepped closer, his phone still recording. How much did the limo cost, Augusta? How much of the money you stole are you wasting on this little show? I didn't steal anything, I said. Sure you didn't. Just like you didn't run away. Just like you're not mentally ill. You're fine, right? Totally stable. That's why you show up after 13 years in a rented limo, trying to prove something to people who stopped caring about you a long time ago. Every word was designed to make me look desperate. The more I defended myself, the worse I'd look. They'd thought of everything. My mother reached out like she was going to touch my arm, her face full of false concern. Sweetie, we can get you help again. Real help this time. Just come inside and let's talk about this calmly. The trap was perfect. If I stayed, I played into their hands. If I left, I proved I was unstable and dramatic. If I tried to defend myself, I looked defensive and unbalanced. The family closed in slightly, a circle of judgment and false concern. Someone suggested calling the police if I didn't calm down, though I hadn't raised my voice or done anything threatening. They were creating a scene, making me the problem. Tyler kept recording, kept narrating for his camera. This is what we've dealt with. This is the kind of thing our family has had to handle. 13 years of not knowing where she was, if she was okay, and she shows up like this. I looked at my mother, at my father, at my brother. I looked at the family who believed them without question, and I realized they'd won again. They'd taken what should have been my moment of triumph and turned it into another weapon against me. But then something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the therapy. Maybe it was the 13 years of survival. Maybe it was finally understanding that their opinion didn't define my reality. I wasn't 18 anymore. I wasn't powerless. And I was done playing their game. I stood there in the center of that circle of judgment, and instead of defending myself, instead of explaining or pleading or running, I did something they didn't expect. I smiled. You're right, I said calmly. The limo is rented. For today, because I wanted to arrive in style. My mother started to say something, probably another accusation, but I kept talking. But the career that paid for it? That's mine. The apartment I own in Seattle? Mine. The investment portfolio I've spent 7 years building? Also mine. I pulled out my phone. I'd prepared for this possibility without fully admitting to myself that I'd need it. I'd hoped they really wanted reconciliation, but part of me had known better. I pulled up my banking app and turned the screen toward the gathered family. My account balance was visible. $432,000. The murmuring stopped. Everyone went quiet. I started with the $60 you gave me at that bus stop, I said, my voice steady. 13 years ago, June 15th, 2012, right after graduation. Remember that, Mom? When you put those crumpled bills in my hand and said, "Good luck out there"? My mother's face paled. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. You drove me to the bus stop at the edge of town. You, Dad, and Tyler. You handed me $60, a backpack with 3 changes of clothes, and you drove away. I was 18 years old, and you abandoned me. My father stepped forward. That's a lie. You ran away. Did I? I looked at Tyler. You were there. You know the truth. Tyler's smirk faltered. His phone was still recording, but now it was capturing something different than he'd planned. I turned to the family. After they left me there, I tried to get help. The shelter in town turned me away because I didn't have ID. My parents had kept all my documents. Then I took a bus to Portland. I got into a youth services program. And that's when my parents filed a missing persons report. We were worried, my mother said, but her voice was weaker now. You reported I was mentally unstable. You said I'd stolen money. You provided fake medical records to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. I pulled up another file on my phone. Documents I'd kept for years, never sure if I'd need them. These are the fraudulent records you filed. Signed by Dr. Richard Winters, who lost his medical license in 2009, 3 years before I supposedly started seeing him. I held up the phone so people could see. Some of the relatives moved closer, squinting at the screen. You had me locked in a behavioral health facility. You tried to have me institutionalized. And when a doctor tried to help me, You brought in lawyers and church members to testify about what good parents you were. An aunt, my mother's sister, whose name I'd forgotten, spoke up. Carol, is this true? My mother's mask was cracking. She's manipulating you. This is what she does. She's always been like this. I have proof of everything, I said. I pulled up another file. This is testimony from Dr. Helen Brennan, the psychiatrist who evaluated me. She documented that your medical records were fake, that I showed no signs of the diagnoses you claimed, that what you did was abuse of the system. I looked at Tyler, and I have proof of why I'm really here today. His face went white. I played the recording. His voice came through my phone speaker clearly. Mom and Dad are offering me $5,000 if I can get you to the reunion. They want to see you fail. Come on, sis, let them have their fun. I need the money. The gathered family heard every word. Tyler lunging for my phone, but I stepped back. I recorded that call 6 months ago because I suspected exactly this, that you didn't want reconciliation. You wanted one more chance to humiliate me, to prove I was nothing. The silence now was different, uncomfortable. Several relatives were looking at my parents with new expressions: doubt, confusion, even anger. Aunt Diane, my mother's sister, stepped forward. Carol, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't actually abandon your daughter. My mother tried to hold on to her victim performance. She was 18. We didn't owe her anything anymore. The words hung in the air. The mask had slipped completely. We'd done our duty, my father added, his voice hard. 18 years. That's what we signed up for. Signed up for? Diane's voice was sharp. She's your daughter. She was never really ours, my mother said, and there it was. The truth I'd always suspected but never had confirmed. We did what we had to do, but we were done. She was an adult. Not our problem anymore. The family was silent, processing this. These weren't the Carol and Frank they thought they knew. Or maybe some of them had always known, and this was just the first time it was being said out loud. I took a breath. This was it, the moment I'd been working toward without fully realizing it. You tried to break me, I said, looking directly at my parents. You left me with nothing. No money, no documents, no support. You filed false reports. You had me committed. You wanted me to disappear or fail or prove that I was as worthless as you always claimed. My voice didn't shake. I'd practiced this truth for years in therapy, in quiet moments alone, in the dark nights when the memories came back. You failed. I survived. I graduated college while working 3 jobs. I built a career in investment analysis. I own property. I have savings. I have a life you said I'd never have. I looked around at the family, at the relatives who'd believed my parents' lies without question. I came here today not because I needed their approval, not because I wanted back into this family. I came because I needed to see them and know, really know, that I'm free. That what they did to me doesn't define me. That I won. Tyler had lowered his phone. His recording had captured everything, but not the story he'd planned to tell. My mother tried one more time. Augusta, please. We can work this out. We can be a family again. We were never a family, I said. Families don't abandon their children at bus stops. Families don't fabricate medical records to have their daughters locked up. Families don't offer their son money to lure someone to a public humiliation. I turned to walk back to the limousine. Several relatives called after me. Diane tried to apologize. A cousin whose name I didn't remember said she didn't know. An uncle said he wanted to hear my side of the story. But I was done explaining, done justifying, done seeking validation from people who'd chosen to believe lies rather than ask questions. My mother's voice rose behind me. You can't just leave like this. After everything we did for you. I turned back one final time. You had your chance to talk. 13 years ago at that bus stop. You chose silence then. I'm choosing it now. I walked to the limousine. The driver opened the door, and I got in. As we pulled away, I looked back through the tinted window. My parents stood on their lawn, looking smaller than I remembered. Tyler had disappeared, probably embarrassed by his own recorded words. Diane and several other relatives were confronting my mother, their body language angry. The perfect family image had shattered. The carefully maintained narrative was broken, and I'd been the one to break it. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Where to, ma'am? The airport, I said. I'm going home. Home. Seattle. My apartment. My life. My future. Not this town, not these people, not this past. As the limo drove away, I felt something release in my chest. For 13 years, I'd carried the weight of their abandonment, the shame they'd tried to put on me, the fear that maybe they were right, that maybe I was the problem. But sitting in that limo, driving away from the reunion that was supposed to break me, I finally understood. Their cruelty said everything about them and nothing about me. Their inability to love me wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their emptiness. I pulled out my phone and deleted Tyler's number. Then I blocked it. I didn't need that door left open. I didn't need to wonder if they'd call again, if they'd try again. I was closing that chapter completely. The sun was setting as we drove back toward Seattle. 13 years ago, I'd watched the sun set while standing alone at a bus stop. Tonight, I was watching it from a limousine, heading back to a life I'd built from nothing. I'd won, not because I had money or success, though those were tools that helped. I'd won because I'd survived, because I'd refused to be erased, because I'd stood in front of the people who'd tried to destroy me and showed them that their power over me was finished. The girl they left at the bus stop with $60 had become a woman they could no longer hurt. And that was the truest victory of all. I spent the flight back to Seattle in first class. Another expense I rarely allowed myself, but that felt right tonight. I stared out the window at the clouds below and let myself process everything that had happened. My phone buzzed constantly. Text messages from relatives I barely knew, suddenly wanting my side of the story. Diane sent a long message apologizing, saying she should have asked questions years ago. A cousin asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. Even distant family members were reaching out, as if the revelation of my parents' cruelty had suddenly made me worth knowing. I turned off my phone. I wasn't interested in being their project, their redemption story. I didn't need their belated concern or their guilty apologies. They'd had 13 years to wonder where I was, to question my parents' story, to reach out. They'd chosen to believe the comfortable lie instead. When I got home to my apartment that night, I took off that expensive dress and hung it in the back of my closet. I didn't think I'd wear it again. It had served its purpose. I washed off the makeup, took down my hair, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked like me again. Not the polished version I'd presented to my family, but the real me. 31 years old, with lines around my eyes from stress and survival, but also from smiling. From building a life worth protecting. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. No nightmares about the reunion, no anxiety about facing my family. Just deep, restful sleep. I woke up Monday morning and went to work like normal, and it felt liberating. My colleague Jennifer asked how my weekend was. It was good, I said. I closed a chapter I'd been putting off for a long time. She smiled, not knowing what I meant, and we moved on to discussing a new client's portfolio. That's what I wanted. Normal. Work. Friendships. A life not defined by trauma. I'd spent 13 years surviving, then building, then preparing. Now I was ready to just live. The weeks after the reunion brought some surprises. Diane kept reaching out persistently until I finally agreed to a phone call. She cried through most of it, apologizing for not being there, for not questioning the story she'd been told. I should have known Carol could be cold, she said. We grew up together. I saw how she was, but I wanted to believe she'd be different with her own children. I didn't absolve her, but I listened. Sometimes, that's all people need. Someone to hear their regret. We ended the call with no promises to stay in touch, no forced relationship. Just acknowledgement of what had been. Tyler tried to call once. I didn't answer. He sent a text that I read but didn't respond to. I'm sorry. I needed the money and I didn't think it through. I didn't realize how much they'd hurt you. There was nothing to say to that. He'd known enough. He'd been there at the bus stop. He'd smirked from the back window. His apology was about easing his own guilt, not about my healing. My parents never reached out at all. Not a call, not a message, nothing. Even after being exposed, even after the family saw their cruelty, they couldn't bring themselves to apologize. Maybe they felt justified. Maybe they felt nothing. I stopped trying to figure it out. 6 months after the reunion, I got a promotion. director of investment analysis, with a significant salary increase. My boss, a woman named Margaret who'd mentored me for years, took me to lunch to celebrate. "You've worked harder than anyone I know," she said. "You've earned every bit of this." I thought about telling her everything. About the bus stop, the survival, the years of building from nothing. But instead, I just smiled and said, "Thank you. It means a lot." Some stories don't need to be told to everyone. Some victories are private. The people who needed to know what I'd overcome had seen it at that reunion. The people in my current life just needed to see who I was now. I started dating someone that fall. His name was Daniel, a teacher I met at a friend's dinner party. He was kind and patient and didn't push when I said I wasn't close with my family. On our 5th date, I told him some of it. Not everything, but enough. I had a complicated childhood. My parents and I don't have a relationship. He nodded, accepting it without prying. Everyone's got family stuff. Mine's messy too. It was normal. Refreshingly. Beautifully normal. We dated for a year before moving in together. He met my chosen family, the friends I'd accumulated over the years, the people who'd helped me build this life. He never asked about my parents again. On the 13th anniversary of the bus stop, I took myself to breakfast. It was a Friday, bright and sunny. I sat in a cafe near my office and ordered pancakes and coffee, and I made a private toast to the 18-year-old girl who'd survived that first night. She'd been so scared, so alone. She couldn't have imagined sitting in a nice cafe wearing professional clothes, with a good job and an apartment and a partner who loved her. She'd just been trying to make it to the next day. "We did it," I whispered to her memory. "We made it." My phone buzzed with a reminder. Therapy appointment at 4. I'd been seeing Dr. Park for 5 years now, and I still went every other week. Some wounds take a long time to heal, and that's okay. I was learning to be patient with my own process. I thought about writing a letter to my parents. I drafted it in my head sometimes. All the things I'd want them to know, to understand, to feel, but I never actually wrote it. Some people don't deserve your words, your truth, your energy. Some people get silence, and that's the kindest thing you can give them. I invested heavily in causes that mattered to me: youth, homelessness organizations, programs for young people aging out of foster care, scholarships for students without family support. I gave anonymously, substantial amounts, because I remembered being that person who needed help and finding doors closed. Money could be a tool for good. Resources could change lives. I'd learned that the hard way, and now I used what I'd built to help others who were where I'd been. My life became full in ways I'd never expected. Work challenges that excited me. A relationship that felt stable and loving. Friendships that ran deep. Hobbies I'd never had time for before, like rock climbing and painting. I traveled, seeing places I'd never thought I'd visit. I built a life that was entirely mine, shaped by choices I made, not by the trauma that had been done to me. The past informed me but didn't define me. That was the real victory. Sometimes people asked if I ever considered reaching out to my parents, trying one more time, making peace. I thought about it, honestly. But peace doesn't require their participation. I'd made peace with what happened. I'd made peace with who they were. That was enough. The last I heard, through Diane, who still occasionally emailed, my parents were fine, still living in the same house, still involved in their church, still presenting themselves as upstanding citizens. The family reunion incident had caused some ripples, but they'd weathered it. People believe what they want to believe. Tyler had moved to California with his family. He'd posted on social media about being a devoted father, about family values, about the importance of being there for your children. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I didn't engage with it. He was living his life, I was living mine. At 33, I bought a house. A real house, with a yard and a mortgage and everything. Daniel and I picked it out together, a small craftsman in a good neighborhood with big windows and a maple tree in the front yard. The day we closed, I stood in the empty living room and thought about that bus stop. 13 years and hundreds of miles between that moment and this one. $60 to a down payment. A backpack to a house full of furniture we'd chosen together. I'd done it. I'd built everything they said I couldn't have. And I'd done it without them, despite them. in defiance of every lie they'd told about me. That was the story I wanted to tell. Not one of victimhood, though I'd been a victim. Not one of mere survival, though I'd certainly survived. But one of becoming. Of transforming abandonment into independence, trauma into strength, isolation into chosen family. I'd been left at a bus stop with $60 and a backpack, and I'd turned it into a life worth living. A life I was proud of. A life that was completely, undeniably mine. That was my revenge. That was my triumph. And that was my peace. Years kept passing, each one adding layers to the life I'd built. At 35, I made partner at the investment firm. It came with a significant increase in both salary and responsibility. Margaret shook my hand in her office and said, "You're one of the best analysts I've ever worked with. This is just the beginning." I thought about beginnings. How many I'd had. The first beginning at 18, terrified and alone. The beginning in Portland when I thought I'd found help. The beginning in Seattle as someone else. The beginning when I reclaimed my identity. Each one had been hard, uncertain, scary, but each one had led here. Daniel and I got married that fall in a small ceremony with 20 people we loved. No family on my side, just friends who'd become family. Jade flew in from Portland, clean now for 8 years and working as a youth counselor. Dr. Park came, which meant everything. Sarah Morrison sent flowers with a note that said, "Look what you built." Standing at the altar, I didn't feel the absence of my parents. I felt the presence of everyone who'd actually shown up in my life. That was what mattered. The one surprise was Diane. She'd asked, tentatively, if she could come. I'd said yes. She'd been the only family member to consistently reach out, to try to understand, to acknowledge the harm. She came alone, cried during the vows, and hugged me afterward. "Your parents don't know what they lost," she whispered. "I know what I found," I said, looking at Daniel and our gathered friends. "That's what counts." At 37, I started a nonprofit. It focused specifically on helping young adults who'd been abandoned or cut off by family. We provided transitional housing, job training, legal help with documents, and mentorship. I funded it primarily myself, with some grants and donations. The first young person we helped was a 19-year-old girl named Mara. Her parents had kicked her out for being gay. She came to our office scared and desperate, and I saw myself in her so clearly it hurt. "You're going to be okay," I told her. "I promise you, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of you getting to choose your own life." She lived in our transitional housing for 8 months. We helped her get her documents, enroll in community college, find a job. When she moved into her own apartment, she cried and hugged me for a long time. "You saved my life," she said. "No," I told her. "You saved your own life. I just helped with the resources." But it felt good to be someone I'd needed when I was 18. To be Dr. Brennan for someone else. To be Sarah Morrison. To be proof that you could survive family betrayal and build something beautiful. The nonprofit grew. Within 3 years, we'd helped over 100 young people. Some went on to college, some to trade schools, some directly to careers. We had success stories and heartbreaking failures, but we kept trying. Every person we helped was someone who didn't have to sleep behind a grocery store like I did. I thought about my parents sometimes. Not as much as I used to. They'd become distant, almost abstract. The people who'd hurt me felt separate from my current life, like characters in a story someone else had told me about. I heard through Diane that my father had another stroke at 75, that Tyler rarely visited them, that my mother had become bitter and isolated. I felt something when I heard this news, but it wasn't satisfaction. It was just sadness for wasted lives, wasted chances at connection. "Do you ever think about reaching out?" Daniel asked once. "Sometimes," I said honestly. "But I've realized forgiveness doesn't require contact. I've forgiven them for my own peace, not for theirs. I don't need them to acknowledge what they did. I don't need their apology. I've moved on." He kissed my forehead. "You're remarkable, you know that?" At 39, I gave a TED Talk. They'd reached out after seeing the work our nonprofit was doing. The topic was resilience in the face of family trauma. I stood on that red circle and told a version of my story. I didn't name my parents. I didn't make it about revenge or exposure. I made it about the bus stop, the $60, and everything I'd built from there. I talked about the people who'd helped me, the systems that had failed me, and the importance of creating safety nets for young people with nowhere to go. The talk went viral, millions of views. Suddenly, I was getting interview requests, speaking invitations, messages from people all over the world who'd experienced similar abandonment. My inbox filled with stories that broke my heart and inspired me. One message stood out. It was from Tyler. "I watched your TED Talk. I'm sorry for everything. I know you won't believe me, but I need you to know that what Mom and Dad did to you was wrong. What I did was wrong. I'm trying to be better with my own kids. I hope you're happy. You deserve it." I read it 3 times. Then I closed it without responding. Some apologies come too late. Some relationships are better left closed. I hoped he was being better with his children, genuinely. But that didn't mean I needed to let him back into my life. My mother sent a message too, through Diane. "Tell Augusta I saw her talk. Tell her I'm proud." Proud. After everything, after years of silence, after abandonment and cruelty and attempts to institutionalize me, she was proud. Because I'd succeeded publicly. Because it looked good. I laughed when Diane told me. Not bitter laughter, just the absurdity of it. "Tell her thank you," I said. "And then don't mention me to her again." At 40, I stood in the office of our nonprofit and looked at the wall of photos. Every person we'd helped. Mara was finishing her nursing degree. A young man named Chris had opened his own business. A trans kid named Alex had reconnected with accepting relatives and was thriving. So many faces, so many stories of survival and building and choosing. "Look what you created," Margaret said. She'd retired from the investment firm but served on our nonprofit board. "Look what we created," I corrected. None of this was just me. But as I looked at those faces, I thought about the 18-year-old girl at the bus stop. If I could go back and tell her anything, what would it be? That she'd survive this. That in 22 years, she'd be standing in an office of a nonprofit she founded, married to someone who loved her, having helped hundreds of young people find their way. That the $60 wouldn't break her. That the abandonment wouldn't define her. That the people who left her would become irrelevant to the beautiful, complicated, meaningful life she'd build. That she'd discover family wasn't biology, it was choice. That she'd learn to trust again, to love again, to believe in her own worth. That she'd win, not in the dramatic, vengeful way you see in movies, but in the quiet, persistent way of waking up every day and choosing herself, choosing growth, choosing to believe she deserved good things. That was the real victory. Not the money, though that helped. Not the success, though that was satisfying. Not the confrontation at the reunion, though that had been necessary. The real victory was building a life so full and meaningful that her parents' abandonment became just one chapter in a much larger story. I'd learned that you can't fix people who won't admit they're broken. You can't make people love you the way you need to be loved. You can't force family to be family. But you can save yourself. You can build your own support system. You can create the life you need instead of waiting for someone else to give it to you. People will try to write your story for you. They'll make you the villain to justify their cruelty. They'll hope you stay silent, stay small, stay broken. The greatest rebellion is refusing that narrative. It's building something beautiful from the ruins they left you in. It's standing in your truth even when everyone's been fed lies. I'd been left at a bus stop 13 years ago with $60 in a backpack. My mother had said good luck out there, like she was sending me on an adventure instead of abandoning me to probable homelessness, danger, and trauma. 13 years later, I'd pulled up to their reunion in a limousine, successful and strong. They hadn't recognized me because I'd become someone they couldn't imagine I'd be. And in the years since, I'd become even more. Not just successful, but fulfilled. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just proving them wrong, but proving myself right. Right to believe I deserved better. Right to keep fighting. Right to build a life worth living. That 18-year-old girl at the bus stop, scared and alone, had no idea what was coming. The pain, yes. The struggle, definitely. But also the victory. The love, the meaning, the becoming. If you're at your own bus stop right now, metaphorically or literally, I need you to hear this. You will survive. It won't be easy. It won't be fair. But You will survive. And if you keep choosing yourself every single day, you'll do more than survive. You'll build something they can't take from you. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when you need them. It's the Dr. Brennans and Sarahs and Jades and Margarets. It's the people you choose and who choose you back. That's real family. And you're stronger than you know. Stronger than they told you. Stronger than the circumstances suggest. You have the power to write your own story, even when someone else tried to write it for you. I'm 41 now as I tell you this. I have a house, a spouse, a career I love, a nonprofit that changes lives, and peace, real peace. Not because my parents apologized or changed or saw the error of their ways, but because I stopped waiting for them to validate my worth. I am worthy. I always was, and so are you. That's what I learned at the bus stop. That's what 13 years taught me. That's what I want you to understand if you're facing your own abandonment, your own betrayal, your own moment of being left with nothing. You are not nothing. You never were. And the people who couldn't see that are the ones who lost, not you. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted let you go? How did you find the strength to keep going? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps others who need to hear this message find it. And if you want more stories about resilience, survival, and choosing yourself, subscribe to this channel. We share stories every week about people who refuse to let their circumstances define them. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe they're at their own bus stop right now. Maybe they need to know they're not alone. Maybe your sharing this will be the thing that helps them believe they can survive too. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope you know your worth. And if you don't yet, I hope you're on your way to discovering it. You deserve good things. You deserve peace. You deserve a life you build on your own terms. Take care of yourselves. Choose yourselves. And remember, the best revenge is living well. Not just existing, but truly, deeply, joyfully living. You've got this. I believe in you.